In this video, I'll show you how to draw a full body female figure using my GSL method and the lovely Zendaya as our model. So the GSL method stands for gesture, shape, and line. We're gonna draw our gesture first, and then we're gonna draw our shapes, and then we're gonna draw our line. So we are going to use one color for each step. The gesture is the action of the pose. Without gestures, your figures will feel stiff instead of dynamic. Gestures also help map the movement, alignment, and balance of the pose. Shapes are the structure of the body, so shapes will help build the figure's silhouette and add mass, and if you're more advanced, you can draw forms instead of shapes. Lines are the details of the anatomy, so leave the line art, outlines, and shading for last. The best lines are the ones that breathe and have rhythm. So let's start with our gesture. So her gesture is very curved like this. So I'm drawing it kind of lightly. And then we're gonna draw in the angle of her shoulders. You'll notice the angle of her shoulders and her hips have opposing angles. I'm gonna try to locate her hips. She's got super long legs and she's wearing heels, which make her legs look even longer. So once you put your pencil down where you think her hips are, it should generally be about half and half, maybe a little bit more. I'm gonna go in the opposite direction like this. And this is one leg, and then the other leg, I'm gonna go towards here. So her other leg's gonna go down like this. And then I'm gonna connect this hip over here with this gesture. Okay, so next, if this is her foot, that's the location of her foot, where do you think her arm goes? Look at where her arm goes. Her arm is just like a little bit above that foot. So I'm gonna say it's about there. And then I'm gonna connect her shoulder to her arm. And then her other shoulder, like if you look at this arm and this tilt, find that tilt and you'll be able to find where her other arm is. This arm is like closer to her hip, and then we're gonna bring that straight down. Okay, so we're basically drawing like a little armature for her. The GSL method guides us to draw like a sculptor would, from the inside out, focusing on the structure. The next thing that I can see is where her chest line is. It's kind of like this, and it's curving up, so you can kind of mark that for yourself. It's easier to remember. So one thing I'd like you to look at, you take your ruler, okay? You want to make sure that her head is balanced between both of her legs. So if her head is like back here, then it's not balanced. So look at the distance between these legs. That's where her head should be. So you want to check that. Otherwise, she's going to feel like she's falling over. Basically, this is my gesture. If I wanted to add more, I can kind of add this gesture here of her flowy skirt. There are some other things that you can mark if you really feel like they will help you. Maybe I'll put the bottom of her foot there, and then maybe like the bottom of her other foot, and then probably her head. Right, remember she should be about 7 heads high. I'm just going to measure her right now. I think I drew the circle a little bit low. Okay, so my first step is my gesture. Then my second step is going to be my shape. I like to draw them in different colors just so I can keep everything organized for myself. So let's really look at the shapes here. So shapes include positive shapes as well as negative shapes. And then I can put in her ears, and let's put in her neck as well. And then where her neck, I'm gonna draw in the bottom of that cylinder, and that's gonna connect to the top of her rib cage. So you can kind of see that her rib cage is tilted. Let's try and draw her rib cage together. Remember not to make it too big. Remember the ratio, 1.5 heads. We'll go ahead and draw in this egg shape. You can also draw in the center line. So I'm changing the center line because the center line is not necessarily the line of my gesture. And then bringing this down, let's draw her hips. So her hips I'm gonna draw as a 3D form. If you have trouble drawing this, just stick to 2D. Okay, you can just kind of draw the 2D shape, but I wanna show you how to actually draw a 3D shape. So her hip is a box that you can kind of see the top of the box, and you can kind of see the side of the box. So now that we have the box shapes, let's turn that into an underwear shape. Let's find the opening of her legs, coming out this way. And then let's put in the spacers for her shoulders. She's got pretty prominent shoulders, like pretty wide shoulders. So let's give her enough space in between. Next, let's put in her leg. So let's find the top of her ankle here. So the top of her ankle, I'm just gonna mark. That's actually the bottom of her leg, right? Her bottom of the leg is not that, that's her foot. So if I find the bottom of her leg all the way to where her leg begins, which is about here. So from here to here, you're gonna find the middle line. So the middle, you can just eyeball it, but the middle would probably be about there for me. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna draw 2 cylinders. So I'm gonna bring this down and start to draw in my cylinder. Now the other part of the leg, don't worry about all of the bendy parts. Don't worry about the calf muscle. Let's just keep the bottom of the leg just a nice, simple cylinder. Feet and heels can be a little bit tricky, so you can kind of see the bottom of the foot is curved, so draw that curve, and then we're going to draw in foot like this. There's a bit of a heel here, and draw a bit of an S curve down to the front of the foot. So you can see that I misjudged my my gesture on this side. After I drew in the box, I was like, ooh, this came out too far, but that's okay. Now I can kind of draw in the other leg. If you like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to draw in the arms. So first of all, if this is my leg, let's put in the kneecap. And then from the kneecap, the hand, let's just kind of gauge whether or not this is the right angle, if this distance is correct. And then I'm going to sketch out the shape of the hand. I'm just going to draw a diamond shape for the hand. Let's divide this in half. Okay, we're going to bring this all the way up. So this should actually be a gesture line. So now let's put in our cylinders. And then let's do the next cylinder. So for this one, you can kind of see her elbow is a little bit wider than her forearm. So you can make the top of that cylinder just slightly wider and then bring that down to her hand. We are going to draw this other arm. So you can kind of see this arm is almost being overlapped by her rib cage a little bit. The other thing that you could consider a shape is her hairline. If we find her hairline up at the top here, right, you can kind of see she's got a very tight ponytail. You can actually see the size of her hand. Should be about that big. So check to see if the size of her face is the same size as her hand. So the other shape that I do see is the shape of her flowy dress. So you can kind of just draw that one as more of an organic shape here. We'll try to draw our roundish oval shapes. Okay, so here's one, and then the other one is going to stick out a tiny bit. So our next and final stage is going to be our line. So this is the part that we usually do first. Remember, we put our line last. Now is the fun part, right? We get to draw those tasty lines that we've been itching to draw since the beginning. So where do you begin? The answer is wherever feels the most natural for you. So for me, I feel like that is the face. And this is where you can really start to put in some details. So I can put in like the detail of her cheekbone. Maybe get her chin there. So you've already drawn this 3 times, right? This is going to be the 3rd time. So the 3rd time should generally be a lot smoother. You already have your guidelines. You already know where everything goes. You should have your proportions down. So now you can just focus on getting beautiful line work. I'm going to do some very simple shading where I take the side of my pencil and I'm just going to shade in her hair. If you want to get that shiny feel of her hair, you can just kind of start at the bottom and work your way up to the top, and start at the split of her hair and kind of work your way down. So the next thing I'm going to do is probably draw in her eyes and her eyebrows. For her eyes, don't really worry about all of those details. Just kind of draw the top of the eye, top of the eyelid, and then her pupils. You can kind of see that one of her eyes is in shadow. For her nose, just kind of draw the line of the bottom. Don't worry about the nostrils. Draw the line of her mouth, which is about 1/3 of the way between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin. Just gonna sketch out the shape of her lip and her bottom lip here. And I realized I made her ears too big, so I don't want her to look super old. So I'm gonna make her ears a little bit smaller. So now let's draw in her shoulders. So remember the attachment here on this side as well goes to the shoulders like this. Her collarbone goes from here, this shoulder, and then here to that shoulder. I think I made her face too short. I'm going to adjust that. That looks better. So you'll notice that her armpit has this line that overlaps, and then her arm goes underneath. And then look at this part of her back. See, her shoulder blade is sticking out behind her torso, right? So make sure that you spend some time on this area, figure out where the overlaps are supposed to go. So now I'm gonna start to sketch out the shapes of her outfit. It should follow the curves that you've already drawn, like a teardrop shape here for her top. And you'll notice that it goes right to her belly button. Notice the curve of the belt here, like this strap. Right, really try to make sure that you have the right direction when you're drawing that strap, because it's really going to inform how everything curves. There's so much stuff going on. Well, yes, right? This is how you're supposed to think about figures, because even though it's confusing, right, you are thinking now in 3D. You are no longer thinking in just outlines. You are drawing from the inside out, and this is how you get really good at figure drawing. No more ignoring what the hips are doing. No more guessing what the legs are doing. You know exactly what they're doing, exactly how to draw it. You can also use your lines to draw in the folds of the clothing. And clothing folds is one of those things that's also really, really hard to understand and really hard to draw. But if you understand how your figure is curving in space or moving in space, it's a lot easier to draw. So when you're doing your line work, that's when you can start to add the muscles and start to add those bumps. So here I'm adding the calf muscle, so you can kind of see that curve starting to happen. You can see the top of her shin is very straight, very, very straight. Like it's like right on that bone there. Do your best when it comes to drawing the heel. Just think in shapes, don't overcomplicate it. If you divide the foot into 3 at the bottom, like the big toe takes up 1/3 of the space. You can kind of divide her toes if you want to. And I'm gonna finish her arm here. This method of drawing you can use for any type of drawing. It can be drawing people, it can be drawing hands, it can be drawing heads. It's a very versatile method, but it's really good for figure drawing. I'm going to use some swirls and some different type of line work for the flowiness of her dress. And I'm not going to draw her other leg as much just because it's behind that dress, right? So I might hint at it, but I'm not going to put too much time into it. I've got one arm to go. So you can put a little bit of muscle on her shoulder. So this muscle at the top is called a deltoid. That deltoid muscle is what lifts your arm up. She has pretty toned arms, so there's quite a bit of definition there. I always find it's easier to divide the hand out of the shape that you made, like the diamond shape, than it is just to draw the hand starting with the outline. So if I wanted to lessen the confusion here, so let's say I want to give her clothing a bit of shading so it's not super messy here, I can do that with the side of my pencil. So let me show you how I would shade it. I would basically like shade in a little bit of her dress. You know, if her belt is a different color, I can just make it a different value. And just to differentiate her, like where her dress is versus her body, adding a little bit of that shading will, like I can still see the lines underneath, but it's a lot cleaner now. Even though this belt is lighter on her, I think I'm gonna make it darker in my drawing, just to kind of help that continuity with these two belts. And then put in some of this flowy material behind it. Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an upload. If you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon for behind-the-scenes perks and online classes at Wing Canvas. Join our Art Nerd community with the links down below. If you enjoyed this video, here are some other videos you can check out next.